The first thing my wife said that night was not meant to destroy me, but it did its job anyway. She lifted her glass under a chandelier bright enough to make every diamond in the room look important, smiled at a table full of executives, and said, "Ethan is a good man, but he will never be rich." The words landed softly, almost politely, which made them worse. Nobody gasped. Nobody corrected her. They laughed the way people laugh when they think the person being cut is too harmless to bleed. I sat beside her in a navy suit I had owned for 7 years, my hands folded over a white linen napkin, watching a drop of red wine slide down the inside of my glass like it was trying to escape the table before I could. Claire laughed with them. My wife of 12 years laughed the loudest, not because the joke was clever, but because she needed them to know she was one of them and I was not. The ballroom at the Langford Hotel in downtown Chicago looked like money pretending to be tasteful. Gold lights spilled across polished floors. Waiters moved between tables with trays of sparkling water and shrimp cocktail, and every conversation had the same smooth rhythm of people measuring each other without admitting it. Northbridge Energy Systems had rented the top floor for its annual investor gala, and Claire had been nervous all week. She had changed dresses 3 times before we left the house, checked her lipstick in the hallway mirror twice, and reminded me in the car not to talk too much about normal things. Normal things. That was what I had become to her. I fixed the loose hinge on our pantry door. I remembered when the furnace filter needed changing. I drove a 12-year-old Ford Explorer with a cracked radio knob and an engine that still turned over every morning because I took care of it. I was normal in all the ways she had once called dependable, back when we ate takeout on the floor of our first apartment and counted a Good Friday as one where the rent cleared and the lights stayed on. But somewhere between her first promotion and her corner office, dependable became embarrassing. Steady became small. Quiet became proof that I had failed. Across the table, a vice president named Brad Mercer leaned back with that easy smile men wear when they have never been told no by someone they respected. "Come on, Claire," he said, glancing at me like I was part of the centerpiece. "Never? That is harsh." Claire touched my sleeve, not with affection, but with performance. "No, I mean it kindly. Ethan does consulting here and there. He is practical. He is grounded. But this world..." She tilted her glass toward the room, toward the sponsors, the bankers, the name badges with embossed titles. "This world is not really his thing." Another ripple of laughter passed around the table. I looked at her hand on my sleeve and remembered when that same hand used to find mine under cheap diner tables. I remembered her falling asleep against my shoulder during road trips through Wisconsin, her hair smelling like vanilla shampoo and gas station coffee. I remembered her telling me she loved that I was not like the men who bragged over every dollar. Now she needed the room to believe I had no dollars worth bragging about. Martin Hale, the CEO of Northbridge, stood 2 seats away, tall, silver-haired, cleanly dressed in a charcoal tux that probably cost more than my first car. He had shaken my hand earlier with the distracted politeness of a man greeting the husband of an employee he might forget by dessert. "Ethan, right?" he had said. "Claire speaks highly of your support." Support. Not work. Not achievements. Not even career. Just support, the soft word people use when they do not know where to place you. I had smiled and said, "Good to meet you, Martin." His eyes had already moved past me before my sentence ended. That was fine. I had spent most of my adult life being underestimated by people who confused volume with value. But there is a difference between strangers getting you wrong and the woman who sleeps beside you helping them do it. The lights dimmed a few minutes later, and Martin walked to the stage while the conversations fell into a polished hush. Behind him, a massive screen glowed with the Northbridge logo, all blue lines and clean energy promises. He spoke about growth, grid modernization, strategic partnerships, and the future of American infrastructure. His voice was confident, but I could hear the tightness underneath it. Men like Martin Hale learned to smile through pressure, but pressure still leaves fingerprints. Then the slide changed. The number appeared in white against a dark blue background. $100 million. A strategic capital requirement to accelerate national expansion. Around me, people leaned forward. Claire's posture sharpened. Brad whistled under his breath. "Now that," he said, "is real money." Claire smiled without looking at me. "Exactly." I kept my eyes on the screen while my phone vibrated once against my thigh. I did not reach for it immediately. I let Martin finish his sentence about finding the right long-term partner, someone aligned with Northbridge's mission and disciplined enough to move quickly. Then I glanced down beneath the edge of the tablecloth. A message from Thomas Reed waited on the screen. Martin Hale's office has requested the full $100 million commitment. They still do not know it is you. For a moment, the laughter from earlier seemed to pull away from me, like sound being dragged down a long hallway. The ballroom stayed bright. The champagne kept bubbling. Claire kept sitting beside me, proud of the distance she had created between her world and mine. I turned the phone face down and placed it beside my fork. My pulse did not jump. My hands did not shake. I had learned a long time ago that power did not need to raise its voice. It could sit quietly at a table, wearing an old suit, while people explained what it would never become. Martin continued speaking, selling hope to a room full of people who did not know how close his company was to the edge. Claire leaned toward Brad and whispered something I did not catch. He laughed again. I looked at the stage, at the glowing number, at the man who would be asking me for it before lunch tomorrow, and I finally understood the shape of the evening. My wife had not just embarrassed me. She had introduced me to the room as a man with no future, while her entire future was waiting for my signature. By the time Martin Hale stepped off the stage, the ballroom had changed temperature. Not in a way anyone else could feel, maybe, but I could. The air around our table seemed thinner, sharper, as if the room had quietly divided itself into people who needed money and people who controlled it. Claire did not notice. She was glowing in the aftermath of Martin's speech, sitting straighter, smiling wider, already imagining the conversations she would have on Monday if Northbridge landed that investment. I had seen that look before. It was the same look she wore when her name first appeared on the company website under senior leadership, the same look she practiced in hotel mirrors before conferences, the same look that slowly replaced the softer woman I married. Brad Mercer lifted his glass toward Martin as he returned to the table. That was a strong pitch, Brad said. $100 million is not pocket change, but if anyone can close it, you can. Martin smiled with the calm of a man who had rehearsed confidence until it sounded natural. We are in active conversations, he said. The right capital partner understands scale. Claire leaned in, eager to be included. Martin has been carrying this company on his back for months, she said. The board knows it. The investors know it. Some people are built for pressure. She did not look at me when she said it, but she did not have to. Some insults are shaped like compliments given to someone else. I took a slow sip of ice water and let the cold sit on my tongue. Years ago, that kind of comment would have made me defend myself. I would have explained my work, corrected the record, tried to remind her that quiet did not mean empty. But marriage teaches you the cost of explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. So I stayed still. Across the room, a jazz trio played something smooth and forgettable. Plates were cleared. Desserts arrived in small, perfect squares that looked designed more for photographs than hunger. Claire barely touched hers. She was too busy performing. Ethan is happiest with simple things, she told the table after someone asked what I did for fun. Tools, old cars, fixing random stuff around the house. Brad grinned. Nothing wrong with that. Every big house needs a handyman. A few people laughed again, softer this time, but still enough. I looked down at my hands. Clean nails. No grease tonight. No cuts from repairing the garage shelf last weekend. Just a gold wedding band and the faint tan line where my watch usually sat. I thought about my father's hands, how they looked after 30 years running a small electrical shop outside Peoria. Thick fingers, cracked skin, permanent lines of dust that soap never fully removed. He used to say a man should never be ashamed of work that keeps the lights on. He also used to say money makes people honest by accident. They show you what they value when they think you have none. I did not understand that when I was 20. I understood it perfectly at 42. Claire excused herself to speak with a board member near the bar, leaving me with Brad, Martin, and two executives whose names I had already forgotten. Martin glanced toward the stage, then checked his phone. For one brief second, the mask slipped. His jaw tightened. His thumb hovered over the screen. A man waiting for rescue can hide panic from a ballroom, but not from another man who knows what panic looks like in a balance sheet. He caught me watching and gave a polite smile. Long night, he said. Big nights usually are, I answered. He seemed mildly surprised that I had replied with anything more than small talk. Claire mentioned you consult. A little, I said. What field? Brad cut in before I could answer. Probably not corporate finance, right? He chuckled, pleased with himself. Do not worry, Ethan. Half of us barely understand Martin's slides, and we work there. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because smiling gave me something to do with my face. Energy systems, I said. Operations, infrastructure, capital efficiency. Boring things. Martin's eyes sharpened for half a second, but Brad was already waving his fork. See, that is the kind of phrase consultants use when they want invoices approved. Another laugh. Martin did not join it this time. He studied me more carefully, as if he had heard a familiar song from another room, but could not place the melody. Before he could ask anything else, Claire returned with a hand on my shoulder. Please do not let him trap you in technical talk, she said brightly. Ethan can make a grocery receipt sound like an engineering report. Her fingers pressed once into my jacket, a warning disguised as affection. Stay small. Stay useful. Stay in the version of yourself I can explain. I looked up at her, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for both of us. She had no idea how much effort I had spent giving her exactly what she claimed to want. Privacy. Stability. A life untouched by the noise of wealth. No reporters. No charity boards asking for checks. No cousins appearing with business ideas. No friendships poisoned by numbers. When Walker Meridian Capital was formed, Thomas Reed and I built it behind layers of managers, holding companies, and legal walls so clean that even most of our partners never saw my name. I did not do it to deceive my wife. At least, that was what I had told myself for years. I did it because I wanted one place in my life where money could not enter first and ask questions later. I wanted my marriage to be that place. But sitting there beneath soft gold lights while Claire smiled over me like I was a harmless household object, I wondered when privacy had become permission for disrespect. The gala ended with applause, handshakes, and the rustle of expensive coats. Downstairs, the Chicago wind pushed hard against the hotel doors, cold enough to make people hurry into waiting cars. Claire walked ahead of me toward the valet stand, her heels clicking against the stone. You were quiet tonight, she said without turning around. I listened. That is not what I mean. The valet brought our Ford around, its dark paint clean but clearly older than the black Cadillacs and German sedans lined behind it. Claire's mouth tightened when she saw it. She waited until we were inside, doors closed, city lights sliding across the windshield, before she let the polished voice fall away. Do you understand how important tonight was for me? Yes. Then why do you always make it harder? I kept both hands on the wheel. By sitting there. By not fitting in. The words came out fast, like they had been waiting all evening. Those people build things, Ethan. They move markets. They take risks. They do not just drift through life doing little projects and pretending peace is the same as success. A red light caught us at Michigan Avenue. Snow from earlier in the week sat gray along the curb. I looked at her reflection in the side window, beautiful, tense, convinced. Is that what you think I do? She exhaled, tired of a conversation she believed she had already won. I think you are comfortable. And comfort can look a lot like giving up. The light turned green. I drove on. My phone vibrated again in the cup holder, but I did not touch it. I already knew it would be Thomas confirming the morning meeting. Claire stared out at the city, arms folded, her diamond bracelet catching flashes of streetlight. Sometimes I feel like I married a man who stopped becoming anything, she said. That one found its place. Not loudly, not dramatically, just deep enough to leave a mark. I pulled into our driveway 20 minutes later, parked beside the silent garage, and turned off the engine. The house in Evanston glowed softly through the front windows, warm and ordinary, the kind of home I once thought proved we had made it. Claire got out first. I stayed seated for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Then I slipped off my wedding ring, held it in my palm, and felt the strange weight of 12 years reduced to a circle of gold. I did not throw it. I did not hide it. I placed it gently inside the center console, closed the lid, and walked into the house behind her. Morning came without forgiveness. It came pale and cold through the bedroom blinds, laying thin stripes of light across the hardwood floor, while Claire slept turned away from me, one hand tucked under her cheek, her breathing steady like nothing important had shifted in the night. I had not slept much. Maybe an hour, maybe less. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that lets old words come back and sit beside you. Not fitting in. Comfortable. Giving up. A man who stopped becoming anything. I stood in the bathroom before sunrise, shaving under a light that made every line on my face look earned. 42 is a strange age for a man. Young enough that people still expect ambition from you. Old enough that they start judging the shape it has taken. Claire thought ambition had to announce itself in tailored suits, luxury cars, and rooms where people laughed too loudly at the chief executive officer's jokes. My father thought ambition was simpler. Pay what you owe. Build something that works. Keep your name clean enough that it does not need polishing. I carried both men into that mirror, the one I was and the one she had decided I could never be. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like coffee and the lemon cleaner Claire liked to buy in bulk. I made 2 cups out of habit, then stopped with my hand on the second mug. Habit is a loyal thing, even when loyalty has started to look foolish. I poured hers anyway and left it by the machine. She came down 20 minutes later in a charcoal blazer and pearl earrings, already wrapped in the armor of work. Her eyes flicked to the mug, then to me. I have a brutal day, she said. No good morning. No mention of the car. No apology for the words that had followed us home like smoke. Board follow-up, investor calls, probably damage control. Damage control? I asked. She opened the refrigerator, then closed it without taking anything. Martin needs this round to land cleanly. There are rumors, and rumors make people nervous. She looked at me then, really looked, but only long enough to confirm I was still the version she expected. I might be late tonight. I have a meeting downtown. Her eyebrows moved slightly. For consulting? Something like that. She gave a small tired smile, the kind people give children who claim they have plans. Well, good. Just please do not make tonight another heavy conversation. I cannot carry emotional drama and a corporate crisis at the same time. There it was again. My pain, filed under inconvenience. I watched her take the coffee, sip it, and set it down untouched. Would it be drama? I asked calmly. Or would it be accountability? Her face tightened. Ethan, not now. That is what you always say when now belongs to me. For the first time, she did not have an answer ready. The silence between us was short, but it had weight. Then her phone buzzed, saving her from whatever truth might have walked in next. She glanced at the screen and straightened. I have to go. She left in a rush of perfume, heels, and controlled urgency. The front door closed, and the house exhaled. I stood there a moment longer, looking at the coffee ring her mug had left on the counter, a perfect brown circle that would wipe away with one pass of a cloth. Some marks are that simple. Others are not. At 7:30, I drove toward downtown Chicago with the city waking around me. Commuter trains rattled along the tracks. Delivery trucks blocked lanes. Steam rose from sidewalk grates in soft white columns. The Ford's heater clicked and groaned before warming properly, and I found comfort in that honest little struggle. It never pretended to be new. It simply did its job. Thomas Reed called as I merged on a lakeshore drive. His voice came through the speakers, even and dry, the way it always did when the stakes were high. Are you still coming in person? Yes. Good. Hale's team believes they are meeting a representative from Walker Meridian, not the principal. I know. Claire will likely be in the building. I know that too. A pause. Thomas had known me for 14 years, long enough to understand when my calm was not peace. Ethan, once they connect your name to the capital, your private life will become less private. I watched the skyline sharpen through the windshield, steel and glass catching the weak winter sun. Maybe it should have become less private years ago. He did not argue. Lawyers charge by the hour, but the good ones know when silence is more useful than advice. We will meet in the lobby at 9:50. I have the revised term sheet, the conflict language, and the audit conditions. And the exposure report? Printed. Bound. Unpleasant. Then bring it. The line clicked off. For a few minutes, there was only the sound of traffic and the old engine carrying me toward a room full of people who thought they were about to negotiate with money that had no face. As I drove, memory opened a door I usually kept locked. 10 years earlier, I had been sitting in a rented office above a dentist in Naperville, eating vending machine pretzels for dinner while a server rack hummed like an anxious refrigerator. My company had not looked like much then. 3 engineers, 2 folding tables, one idea no one glamorous cared about. We built software that helped regional utilities predict equipment failures before neighborhoods lost power. Boring work, I used to call it. Boring until a heat wave hit Indiana, and our system saved a utility millions in emergency repairs. Boring until a private equity firm flew in from New York and asked who owned the code. Boring until the number on the purchase agreement had more zeros than my father had ever seen in one place. Claire remembered that sale differently, or maybe she chose not to remember it at all. Back then, I told her only what felt safe. Enough to pay off the house. Enough to stop worrying. Enough to let her chase her career without asking what dinner cost. I did not tell her about the second deal, or the equity rollover, or the quiet investments Thomas helped structure after my father died and half the family suddenly discovered my phone number. I told myself secrecy was protection. Protection from greed, from pressure, from becoming a walking bank account in my own life. What I did not see was the other cost. When you hide your strength too well, the wrong people start calling it weakness. I reached the Northbridge Tower at 9:43. 40 stories of blue glass rose over the street, reflecting the city back at itself like it had invented the skyline. I parked 2 blocks away instead of using the executive garage. Old habits. Simple exits. The sidewalk wind cut through my coat as I walked, carrying the smell of roasted coffee, wet pavement, and bus exhaust. Inside the lobby, everything was marble, brushed steel, and quiet money. Thomas stood near the security desk with a leather folder under one arm, silver hair combed neatly, expression unreadable. "You look tired," he said. "I was educated last night. By your wife. By the room." He nodded once, as if that explained everything. The elevator opened behind him with a soft chime. We stepped inside. As the door slid shut, I saw Claire crossing the lobby with 2 colleagues, phone to her ear, face serious and beautiful under the white lobby lights. For half a second, her eyes met mine. Confusion touched her expression first. Then irritation. She thought I had come to apologize at her office, maybe to repair the embarrassment I had caused by existing incorrectly. The elevator doors closed before she could speak. Thomas glanced at me. "Do you want a minute?" I looked at my reflection in the polished metal doors. Same old suit. Same quiet face. Same man she thought she understood. "No," I said. "Let us go upstairs." The elevator climbed without a sound, and I watched the numbers glow one by one above the doors like a countdown no one else could hear. Thomas stood beside me with his leather folder tucked under his arm, calm as a courthouse hallway. I could smell fresh polish on the elevator walls, expensive cologne from someone who had ridden before us, and underneath it all that sterile office scent every corporate tower has: coffee, carpet glue, and ambition. My phone buzzed twice in my coat pocket. I did not check it. I already knew one of the messages would be from Claire. The other might be from Martin Hale's assistant confirming what floor they expected us on, as if the whole morning were normal, as if the man they needed had arrived in a black car with tinted windows instead of walking in from a public parking garage 2 blocks away. Thomas glanced at the closed doors. "Once we step into that room, you do not have to perform humility for anyone." I almost smiled. "I never performed it." "No," he said. "But you let people mistake it for surrender." That one stayed with me. The elevator opened onto the 38th floor, and the world changed from marble lobby quiet to executive floor quiet, a softer kind of silence with thicker carpet and better lighting. Behind a glass wall, Chicago spread out beneath a gray winter sky, Lake Michigan flat and cold in the distance. A receptionist looked up with professional brightness, the kind of smile trained not to ask questions. Thomas gave our names. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, then paused. She looked at me, then at the screen, then back to Thomas. "Mr. Reed, they are expecting you." "I do not see." Thomas placed a business card on the desk. "Mr. Walker is with me." The card did something her training could not hide. Her posture changed. Not dramatically, just enough. A small straightening of the spine. A careful glance toward the conference room. Money does that before it even enters a room. It sends a draft under the door. She pressed a button on her phone and lowered her voice. "Mr. Hale, your guests are here." Guests. I looked at that word sitting in the air and thought about the night before, about being introduced as a man who did consulting here and there, like my life was a hobby that occasionally produced an invoice. The conference room doors opened, and Martin Hale stepped out with both hands extended, wearing the polished relief of a man who sees a rope thrown into deep water. "Thomas," he said warmly. "Good to finally meet in person." Then his eyes landed on me. For 1 second, nothing happened. His hand remained halfway forward. His smile stayed in place, but the machinery behind it jammed. Recognition tried to assemble itself and failed. He knew my face from the gala. He knew my name as Claire's husband. But those two facts had no business standing next to Thomas Reed outside a $100 million capital meeting. Ethan, he said carefully, I did not realize you were joining us. Neither did your team. Thomas said, not unkindly. Martin's smile adjusted, smaller now. Of course. Please, come in. The room was long and bright, with a white table polished enough to reflect the ceiling lights. 5 people sat inside. Brad Mercer was there, flipping through a printed deck with a pen in his mouth until he saw me and removed it slowly. The chief financial officer, a woman named Denise Carver, sat near the screen with a laptop open and 2 phones face down beside it. 2 board members occupied the far end, both gray-haired, both wearing expressions built from years of pretending surprise was beneath them. Claire was not there yet. That was the first mercy of the morning, or maybe the last. Martin gestured toward the seats. We appreciate Walker Meridian making. Tom on short notice. As you know, the opportunity here is time-sensitive. Thomas sat first, placing his folder on the table with a soft thud. I sat beside him. No one offered me coffee. That was fine. My stomach had already turned the morning into something too sharp for coffee. Brad leaned forward, recovering faster than the others. Ethan, small world. I did not know your consulting work connected with Walker Meridian. His tone tried to stay casual, but a question trembled beneath it. How much did I miss? Thomas opened the folder. Before we begin, I want to clarify representation. I am legal counsel for Walker Meridian Capital and for its principal decision-maker. Martin nodded. Understood. Thomas turned one page, then looked directly at me. Mr. Walker has final authority on this commitment. Silence did not fall all at once. It arrived in pieces. Brad stopped moving his pen. Denise looked up from her laptop. One board member blinked twice. Martin's face did not lose color the way people say in stories, but it changed. The confidence drained from the edges first, then from the eyes. He looked at me as if the room had shifted 3 feet to the left while he was standing still. Mr. Walker, he said slowly. The new title sounded strange in his mouth because last night he had not needed one for me. I folded my hands on the table. Martin. Nobody laughed. Nobody filled the space. The city moved silently behind the glass, cars crawling along the streets 38 floors below, tiny and unaware. Thomas slid a document across the table. The original proposal from Northbridge requested a $100 million strategic investment in exchange for preferred equity, board observation rights, and limited operational oversight. After reviewing the internal materials provided last night, our position has changed. Denise sat straighter. Changed how? Thomas tapped the folder once. There are concerns. Revenue recognition timing, vendor obligations, executive compensation acceleration, and internal communications related to the public narrative around this raise. Martin's jaw tightened. Those are complex matters, but explainable. Most things are. Explainable, I said. Not all things are acceptable. The words came out calm, but the room heard them. Brad looked down at the deck as if the pages might hide him. Martin clasped his hands on the table. Ethan, I wish I had known last night that you were connected to this process. I held his gaze. Would it have changed how you treated me? He did not answer quickly enough. That was the answer. The conference room door opened then, and Claire stepped in with a tablet against her chest, speaking before she looked up. Sorry, Martin, legal asked for the updated communications grid, and her voice stopped. Her eyes found me at the table, then Thomas, then the folder, then Martin's face. Confusion came first, just like in the lobby. Irritation followed, then something colder. Understanding had not arrived yet, but it was walking toward her. Ethan, she said, what are you doing in this meeting? Thomas closed the folder halfway, as if marking the exact moment the morning became unavoidable. Martin looked at Claire, then back at me, and for the first time since I had known him, the chief executive officer of Northbridge Energy Systems seemed to be asking permission without using the word. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand. I simply looked at my wife across a table built for powerful people and said, I was invited. Claire stood just inside the conference room with her tablet held against her blazer, and I could see her mind trying to protect itself. It reached first for the easiest explanation. A misunderstanding. A scheduling accident. Maybe I had followed her upstairs after our argument. Maybe Thomas was helping me with some small consulting issue. Maybe this was one of those embarrassing husband moments she would have to smooth over later with a tense smile and an apology to people who mattered. I watched each theory appear and fail behind her eyes. Martin did not rescue her. Brad did not joke. Denise Carver closed her laptop halfway, not out of disrespect, but because even numbers can wait when the real equation walks into the room. Claire finally lowered the tablet. Invited by whom? She asked. Her voice was controlled, but the edges were thin. Thomas answered before I could. By Northbridge Energy Systems, through its executive office and capital advisory team. Claire looked at him, then back at me. For what purpose? Thomas slid another document across the table, the cover page facing her. Walker Meridian Capital was printed at the top in clean black letters. Below it sat the investment summary, the requested amount, and my name in the line she had never been meant to see this way. Ethan James Walker, principal owner and final approval authority. Claire stared at the page. Nobody spoke. The heating system hummed overhead. Somewhere beyond the glass, an elevator chimed. Her face did not collapse all at once. It tightened first, like a person bracing against cold water. Then the color in her cheeks changed. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just enough for a husband of 12 years to know the truth had landed. This is not funny, she said. The words were meant for me, but they sounded like they were meant for herself. I leaned back slightly. I agree. Martin cleared his throat. Claire, there are confidentiality layers around Walker Meridian. Very few people knew the identity of the principal. You knew? She asked him. No, Martin said. Not until 10 minutes ago. That answer hurt her more than if he had lied. I could tell. Claire had spent years building herself into a woman who knew what important rooms knew. Now she was standing in one, learning she had been outside the most important fact in it. Brad shifted in his chair. So last night at the gala, he stopped because he finally remembered he had laughed. There are moments when shame moves through a room without anyone naming it. It settles on shoulders, straightens backs, dries throats. I felt it move around the table, touching everyone who had found me harmless 12 hours earlier. Claire looked at me again, but this time she was not looking at the old suit or the quiet face or the man she had called comfortable. She was trying to find the border between the husband she thought she had and the stranger with $100 million of leverage sitting beside a corporate attorney. How long? She asked. That was the question. Beneath all questions. How long had I had money? How long had I hidden it? How long had she been wrong? Thomas glanced at me, a silent warning. Personal conversations do not belong inside financial negotiations. But life rarely respects conference room boundaries. Long enough, I said. Claire's eyes sharpened. That is not an answer. It is the only one this room needs. Martin placed both palms lightly on the table. We should refocus. Mr. Walker, Thomas, we respect the need for diligence. Northbridge is prepared to answer any concerns raised in your review. He was trying to regain altitude. I did not blame him. A chief executive officer learns quickly that emotional fires can burn down practical deals. But I had not come to be managed. I looked at Thomas. He opened the bound report, and the sound of paper turning seemed louder than it should have been. Our review identified several areas requiring immediate clarification before any commitment can proceed, Thomas said. First, an independent audit of deferred vendor obligations. Second, full disclosure of side letters connected to the expansion contracts in Ohio and Texas. Third, suspension of executive bonus acceleration until post-investment governance is established. Fourth, removal of any Northbridge personnel with a personal conflict from communications, negotiation, and approval channels related to Walker Meridian. Claire understood that one before anyone explained it. Her chin lifted. Personal conflict? Thomas did not soften his voice. You are married to the principal investor. I did not know that. That is precisely the concern. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Martin, expecting him to defend her role, her work, her importance. Martin looked down at the document. It was a small betrayal, corporate and clean. Not personal enough to apologize for, but clear enough to feel. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Claire had spent years worshiping rooms like this, believing they rewarded loyalty, polish, and proximity to power. Need to wall Claire off from the process. The words hit harder because they came from another woman, calm and professional, with no anger to blame. Claire nodded once, too quickly. Of course. If that is required, I will comply. She said it well. She always did. but her hand tightened around the tablet until her knuckles paled. Martin turned back to me. Ethan, I want to be direct. Northbridge needs this partnership. We have a strong business, real assets, and a path to national growth. Some reporting issues may have been handled imperfectly, but the fundamentals are sound. Then the audit should help you prove that. It could delay the raise. A bad raise deserves delay. Brad looked at me like he had discovered a different language in my mouth. Last night, he thought I was the kind of man who could be reduced to a punchline. Now every sentence I spoke had cost attached to it. Martin exhaled through his nose. And if we agree to your conditions? Then Walker Meridian continues diligence. And if we do not? I looked at the glowing skyline beyond him. The city stacked with offices where men and women made decisions that sounded clean on paper and messy in real life. Then you can keep looking for someone who wants less truth for more money. The room went still again. Claire's eyes stayed on me. I could feel the questions she was holding back for later, when there would be no table between us and no executives watching. But later was not here yet. Here, she was not my wife first. She was an employee in a conflicted position. Here, I was not the man who fixed the pantry hinge or poured her coffee before sunrise. I was the signature her company needed and the mistake her pride had made visible. Thomas slid the final page forward. We will need written acceptance of these preliminary terms by 5 o'clock today. Martin stared at the page. Then, slowly, he picked up the pen. Martin Hale held the pen above the paper, but he did not sign right away. Men like Martin do not hesitate because they need more ink. They hesitate because the signature changes the room. 1 minute he was asking for capital as if Northbridge were choosing between eager partners. The next, he was accepting terms from the man his own table had treated like background noise less than a day earlier. I watched his fingers tighten around the pen, and I knew exactly what he was calculating. Pride against payroll, control against collapse, reputation against the quiet math that had already trapped him. Finally, he set the pen down without writing and looked at Thomas. I need to confer with counsel before signing anything by 5 o'clock. Thomas closed the folder halfway. That is expected. Martin turned to Denise. Set it up. Denise nodded and began typing. Brad stared at the table with the expression of a man replaying every laugh he had spent too cheaply. Claire had not moved. She stood near the door, still holding the tablet, her face arranged into professionalism by force alone. I knew that face. I had seen it at funerals, during bank problems early in our marriage, after her first failed promotion interview. Claire was good at looking composed while something inside her scrambled for footing. But this was different. This was not a storm outside the house. This was the foundation answering back. Martin looked at me again. Ethan, if there are personal complications here, I would prefer they not interfere with a deal that affects 700 employees. That was a polished sentence. Smooth, responsible, framed around workers and families, not executive urgency or board pressure. I respected the craft of it. I also recognized the attempt to make my boundaries look selfish. 700 employees are one reason I am asking for clean books, I said, not a reason to ignore dirty corners. Denise looked down quickly. One of the board members shifted in his chair. Martin nodded slowly, accepting the hit because he had to. Fair. Claire finally spoke. Could I have a moment with my husband? The word husband entered the room like an object nobody wanted to touch. Thomas looked at me. His eyes said no. His silence said decide. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and picked up my phone from the table. 5 minutes. Claire opened the door and stepped into the hallway. I followed. The door closed behind us with a soft click, cutting off the conference room and leaving us in a corridor lined with framed photographs of solar fields, wind farms, smiling crews in hard hats, and ribbon cuttings under blue skies. Corporate hope, printed and mounted. Claire walked 10 feet away from the door before turning around. Up close, the calm was thinner. What is happening? She asked. You were in the room. Do not do that. Her voice dropped. Do not speak to me like I am one of them. I looked at her carefully. Last night, I was one of them to you. That landed. She blinked, and for half a second the wife came through the executive. Then the executive pulled her back. You hid a company from me. I hid wealth. That is not better. It was supposed to be. She gave a small laugh with no humor in it. You expect me to believe that? That you secretly controlled an investment firm for years out of some noble desire to protect our marriage? No, I said. I expect you not to understand it today. Her mouth tightened. How much? There it was. Not why. Not are you okay. Not what happened to us that you felt you had to build walls this high. How much? The question did not surprise me, but it still made something in me go quiet. Enough that the number would change how you are speaking to me right now. She looked wounded by that. Maybe because it was true. That is unfair. So was last night. I was joking. No, Claire. You were clarifying my rank. The hallway seemed to narrow around us. Behind her, through the glass wall at the far end, Chicago sat under a low gray sky, hard and beautiful and indifferent. Claire folded her arms across the tablet. Do you know what it felt like seeing your name on that document? Sitting there beside Thomas like some stranger with power over my company. Probably close to what it felt like sitting beside you last night while you explained to a table of strangers that I had none. Her eyes flashed. I was under pressure. Pressure does not create contempt. It reveals it. She looked away then, toward the framed photograph of a Northbridge crew standing in front of a substation in Iowa. I remembered a younger Claire asking me what a substation did. We were 29, eating burgers in the car after helping a friend move. I drew a terrible diagram on a napkin, and she laughed so hard she spilled fries into her lap. Back then, she made curiosity feel like love. Somewhere along the way, she stopped asking and started ranking. Why did you let me think we were just comfortable? She asked quietly. Because comfortable used to be enough for us. You should have told me. Maybe. That was the truth. Not all of it, but enough. And you should have loved me better when you thought there was nothing to gain from it. Her face changed. It was not anger now. Anger would have been easier. This was recognition, and recognition has fewer places to hide. She lowered the tablet to her side. Are you doing this to punish me? If I wanted to punish you, I would have signed nothing, said nothing, and watched Northbridge find out from somebody else. Then what do you want? I thought of the wedding ring in the center console of my Ford. I thought of the coffee I had poured for her that morning out of habit. I thought of 12 years of building a quiet life she had begun to treat like a waiting room for something better. I want the truth to stop being inconvenient. Before she could answer, the conference room door opened, and Thomas stepped into the hall. His expression was controlled, but his eyes were alert. Ethan, he said, you need to see this. We went back inside. The mood had shifted again. Denise had a document on the screen now, a chain of internal emails with highlighted sections. Martin stood at the head of the table, face hard, while Brad stared at the floor. One of the board members looked furious in that bloodless corporate way, the kind that arrives with legal exposure attached. Thomas handed me a printed page. This was included in the late production from Northbridge Council. It appears communication staff were instructed to shape the investor narrative around a confirmed commitment before any commitment existed. I read the highlighted line once. Then again. Claire saw the page and went still. Her name was in the email thread, not as the author of the financial claim, but as the person who approved the language for external talking points. Strategic partner secured in principle. Capital expected to close this quarter. Strong private backing. It was not fraud by itself. Thomas would have said so if it were. But it was careless. Aggressive. Designed to make the market believe Northbridge was safer than it was. Claire whispered, that was based on what Martin's team gave us. Martin turned sharply. Claire. The warning in his voice was immediate. There it was, the machine protecting itself. I looked from him to her, then to the email on the screen. Last night had been personal. This was business. The two had finally met in the middle of the table, and neither one looked clean. I set the page down. The audit condition is no longer preliminary, I said. Martin did not speak. I looked at Thomas. Make it mandatory. Full scope. Independent firm. No exclusions. Thomas nodded. Claire stared at me as if she wanted to argue, but could not find a safe sentence. I turned back to Martin. And until it is complete, nobody uses Walker Meridian's name, implied backing, or expected capital in any communication. Internal or external. Martin swallowed. Understood. I picked up my coat from the chair. The meeting was not over, but I was. You wanted a partner who understood scale, I said. Start by understanding consequence. Then I walked out before anyone could make the silence smaller. The elevator ride down felt longer than the climb up, even though gravity was doing half the work. I stood alone this time, facing my reflection in the brushed metal doors, holding my coat over one arm and feeling the shape of the morning settle into my bones. There are moments in a man's life when anger offers itself like a cheap drink. Easy to grab, Easy to swallow, guaranteed to leave you worse by nightfall. I did not take it. Not in the conference room. Not in the hallway. Not when Claire looked at me like my honesty had been the betrayal. The doors opened into the lobby, and the marble floor returned me to the ordinary world of security badges, coffee cups, and people hurrying toward meetings that would feel important until the next meeting replaced them. I walked past the receptionist, past the glass turnstiles, past a wall displaying Northbridge's slogan about powering tomorrow. Outside, the wind hit my face with a clean slap of February air. Chicago did not care about private disappointments. Buses sighed at the curb. A bike messenger threaded between taxis. Somewhere, a man in a Bears jacket argued into his phone about lunch plans. The city kept moving, and for that, I was grateful. I needed motion around me because stillness would have made me think too much. I walked the 2 blocks to my Ford, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. The ring was still in the center console. I opened the lid and looked at it resting beside old parking receipts and a tire pressure gauge. 12 years, tucked between errands. I did not put it back on. I did not take it inside my pocket either. I simply closed the lid again, because some decisions are not made in one dramatic second. Some are made by not reversing the quiet thing you already did. My phone buzzed before I reached the expressway. Thomas. I answered through the speakers. Northbridge Council is pushing back on the full scope audit, he said. Of course they are. Martin is trying to keep the communication review separate. No, that was my answer. I changed lanes behind a delivery truck painted with a giant loaf of bread, absurdly cheerful against the gray morning. And Claire. Thomas was silent for a beat. She has been formally walled off from the investment process pending review. Her access to the deal room has been suspended. I pictured her badge failing at some digital door, her name removed from a thread she would have controlled yesterday, her carefully built place at the table shrinking by policy instead of argument. I did not feel victory. That surprised me. I felt a tired sadness, the kind that comes when consequence finally arrives and looks smaller than the pain that invited it. Was that necessary? I asked. Yes, Thomas said. No softness. No hesitation. And you know it. I did. That was the problem with truth. Once you recognized it, comfort could not negotiate it down. I drove north instead of going home, taking Sheridan Road along the lake where the water looked like dark steel under a low sky. Years earlier, Claire and I used to come this way on Sunday mornings when we were broke enough to call a drive a date. We would pick up coffee, split a blueberry muffin, and look at houses we could not afford, inventing lives for the people inside them. She would point at a big brick place with white columns and say, "That family definitely owns a golden retriever named Winston." I would choose a smaller house with a crooked porch and say, "No, that one. That one is better light." She used to laugh at that. Better light. Not bigger rooms. Not a longer driveway. Not a wine cellar or a membership at some club. Better light. That was the woman I married. I missed her so suddenly that I had to pull into a lakefront parking lot and sit with both hands on the wheel until the feeling passed. Grief is not only for the dead. Sometimes you grieve the living version of someone who stopped coming home. At 11:40, Claire called. I watched her name glow on the screen through the steering wheel. For the first 2 rings, I let it go. Not to punish her. To steady myself. Then I answered. She did not say hello. They removed me from the Northbridge file. Her voice was tight, controlled, but there was a tremor underneath it she could not iron out. Thomas told me. Did you ask for that? I asked for conflicts to be handled properly. That sounds like something your lawyer wrote for you. It sounds like something true. She exhaled, and I heard office noise behind her, muffled voices, the faint beep of an elevator, the atmosphere of a place where she could not afford to fall apart. Martin is acting like I created the language myself. Brad will not even look at me. Denise sent me a formal access notice like I am a liability. Are you calling because you are hurt, or because you need me to fix it? The question hung there. For once, she did not answer quickly. I do not know, she said, and the honesty in that small sentence did more to move me than any apology would have. I looked out at the lake. A gull lifted into the wind and vanished beyond the windshield frame. Claire, last night you told. A room I would never be rich because you thought that made me safe to diminish. Today, that room learned something else, and now you are feeling what it is like to be defined by one version of a story. I was wrong, she said. The words were quiet. Too quiet for victory. About the money? I asked. Another pause. About you. I closed my eyes for a second. That was the sentence I had wanted, maybe for years. And still, it did not repair what I thought it would. Some apologies arrive after the bridge has already shown its cracks. They matter. They just do not make the crossing safe. I need time, I said. So do I, she replied. No, I said gently. You need consequences. Time is what comes after. She went silent, and in that silence I heard the old Claire, the one who would have argued, defended, reframed, made herself the injured party because injury was easier than accountability. But she did not do that. Are you coming home tonight? She asked. I looked at the center console, at the place where the ring waited in darkness. I am not sure. Her breath caught softly, not dramatic, just human. Ethan, I am not disappearing. I just cannot walk back into the house and pretend the furniture is in the same place. I understand. I did not know if she did. Maybe understanding was only beginning to knock. We ended the call without anger, which somehow made it heavier. By early afternoon, Thomas sent the revised terms. Full independent audit. Communication freeze. Executive compensation hold. Board observation rights converted to conditional board seat rights if material misstatements were found. It was clean, firm, and impossible to confuse with a favor. At 4:52, 8 minutes before the deadline, Martin signed. Not because he respected me. Not yet. He signed because payroll was coming, lenders were circling, and the truth had learned my name. The signed document came through while I was sitting in a small diner off Central Street, eating soup I could barely taste. I read Martin's brief note twice. Northbridge accepts the preliminary conditions and will cooperate fully. I set the phone down beside the spoon and watched steam rise from the bowl. People, imagine the moment of leverage as a thunderclap. Sometimes it is just a man alone in a vinyl booth, realizing that getting what he demanded has not made him whole. Outside the diner window, evening gathered over Evanston, turning storefront glass into mirrors. In one of them, I saw myself clearly enough. Old suit, tired eyes, no ring on my finger, not ruined, not triumphant, just awake. By the time I finally drove home, the sky had gone the color of wet concrete. Evanston streets were slick under the streetlights, and the houses along our block glowed with the ordinary peace of people cooking dinner, sorting mail, helping kids with homework, living inside problems that had not yet become public. I parked in our driveway and sat there while the engine ticked itself quiet. Through the front window, I could see the lamp Claire always turned on in the living room before sunset. Warm light pooled over the couch, the bookshelf, the framed photo from our trip to Door County 8 years earlier. In that picture, Claire was laughing with her hair blown across her face, and I was looking at her instead of the camera. I used to think that photograph captured happiness. Now I wondered if it captured attention, which is close enough to be mistaken for love when you are young. The wedding ring was still in the center console. I opened it, picked up the ring, and held it between my thumb and forefinger. It looked smaller than it should have, too small for the weight it had carried. I slipped it into my coat pocket instead of putting it back on. That was not a decision to end anything. It was a decision not to pretend. Inside, the house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary. Claire had cooked. That alone told me how shaken she was. For the last few years, cooking had become something she described as inefficient, a task for weekends or restaurants or prepared meals from the store. But there she was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled to her elbows, standing over a cutting board with a dish towel folded too neatly beside her. She looked up when I came in. No blazer now. No tablet. No corporate armor. Just a gray sweater, dark jeans, and a face that had spent the day losing arguments with itself. Dinner is almost ready, she said. Her voice was careful, like she was setting a glass down on the edge of a table. I hung my coat by the door. You did not have to do that. I know. She turned back to the stove. I wanted to. I almost said thank you, but the words felt too small for the room and too polite for the truth. So I washed my hands and stood near the counter, watching steam rise from a pan of green beans. For a few minutes, we moved around each other like strangers in a house they both owned. Plates, silverware, water glasses, the little domestic choreography that survives even when trust does not. We sat at the kitchen table instead of the dining room. The overhead light hummed faintly. Outside, a car passed slowly, tires whispering over damp pavement. Claire took one bite, then set her fork down. I did not know how to come home today, she said. I looked at her across the table. Neither did I. Her eyes moved to my left hand. She noticed the empty finger immediately. Of course she did. Claire noticed details. She had simply stopped noticing the right ones. Is it in the car? She asked. My pocket. Her mouth trembled once, then steadied. That feels worse. It is more honest. She nodded, and for once she did not fight the sentence. The woman sitting across from me was not the woman from the gala, not exactly. Pride was still there. Pride does not leave in a day. But something had cracked open around it, and through that crack I could see fear, shame, maybe even the beginning of humility. Martin called me after you left, she said. Human resources too. I am officially removed from all investor communications until the audit is complete. That is appropriate. I know. She swallowed. They are also reviewing every statement my team approved in the last 6 months. I set my fork down. Are you worried? Yes. Because you did something wrong? She looked toward the window, where our kitchen reflected back at us in the dark glass. Because I stopped asking whether something was true if it helped the story we wanted to tell. That was the first answer that sounded like a door opening instead of closing. She turned. Back to me. At Northbridge, everything became language. Positioning. Narrative. Momentum. If the numbers were uncomfortable, we softened them. If the risk was obvious, we called it timing. I told myself that was business. Her hands folded around her water glass. Then today I watched Thomas read those emails out loud, and all I could think was that I had started doing the same thing to you. I did not speak. I wanted to hear where she would go without me guiding the apology into shape. Claire breathed in slowly. I softened what you were when you did not match the story I wanted. I called you grounded when I meant unimpressive. I called you comfortable when I meant I was embarrassed. I told people you were simple because it made me feel more complicated. The words cost her. I could see that. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were accurate. Accuracy cuts cleaner than confession. Why? I asked. It was the question that had been waiting under every other one. She looked down at her plate. Because I was scared I had outgrown the life we built, and I did not want that to make me shallow. So you made me small instead. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. I respected that more than I expected to. Yes, she whispered. There it was. No excuse. No pressure. No quick reach across the table to make the pain useful. Just yes. The kitchen felt painfully familiar around us. The small scratch on the table from when we dragged in the Christmas tree too fast. The blue mug Claire chipped and refused to throw away. The refrigerator magnet from Mackinac Island. A life does not disappear because one truth enters it. That is what makes truth hard. It has to stand in the same room as everything that was real. I should have told you about Walker Meridian, I said. Claire looked up. I had not planned to say it, but once it was out, it belonged there. Not because you had a right to every number, but because secrecy became easier than trust. And I let that happen too. She wiped at one eye quickly, almost annoyed with herself. Were you testing me? No. At first I was protecting us. Then I was protecting myself. There is a difference, and I ignored it. She nodded slowly. What happens now? I leaned back in the chair, tired in a way sleep would not fix. The audit happens. Northbridge tells the truth or pays for hiding it. Thomas handles the deal. You cooperate fully. And us. The word was small. Smaller than the company. Smaller than the money. Bigger than both. I reached into my pocket and placed the ring on the table between us. Claire stared at it, but did not touch it. I do not know yet, I said. But I know this. I will not be loved less when I appear to have less. I will not be respected only after someone reads my balance sheet. And I will not return to a marriage where my silence is mistaken for permission. Claire closed her eyes. When she opened them, the executive polish was gone. Then I have work to do. I stood and picked up my plate. So do I. We cleaned the kitchen together without music, without touching, without pretending the evening had healed us. But when I went upstairs to the guest room, I heard Claire remain at the table long after the dishes were done. I did not look back. Some nights are not for reconciliation. Some nights are for letting the truth sit under the same roof and seeing who can bear its weight. The next morning, the house felt different, not quieter, exactly, but more aware of itself. Every floorboard seemed to remember the conversation from the night before. Every doorway held the shape of words we had not known how to say for years. I woke in the guest room at 6:15, staring at a ceiling I had only ever looked at when relatives visited or when one of us had the flu and needed space. The sheets smelled like cedar from the linen closet. My suit jacket hung over the chair. My wedding ring was still downstairs on the kitchen table, unless Claire had moved it. I did not know which possibility bothered me more. For a long time, I lay still and listened to the house waking without us pretending to be normal. No shower running in the main bedroom. No heels crossing the hall. No quick phone calls about decks, meetings, or executive updates. Then, from the kitchen, I heard the soft clink of a mug against the counter. Claire was awake. I washed my face, changed into jeans and a dark sweater, and went downstairs. She was standing at the island with her hair pulled back, reading from her laptop with a legal pad beside her. The ring sat exactly where I had left it, a small gold circle between us and whatever came next. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes were tired, but clear. "Good morning," she said. Not bright, not forced, just careful. "Good morning." She had made coffee again. 2 mugs this time. Mine was black, no sugar, the way I drank it. Hers sat untouched near the laptop. I picked mine up and leaned against the counter. "Northbridge." She nodded. Human Resources asked for my written timeline by noon. Denise requested every communications approval connected to the investor materials. Martin sent a company-wide note at 5:40 this morning announcing an independent audit. That was fast. Thomas moves fast. So does fear. Claire accepted that without flinching. That mattered. Yesterday, she would have called it unfair. Today, she wrote something on the legal pad and looked back at the screen. The note did not name Walker Meridian, but everyone knows something happened. People usually do. She closed the laptop slowly. "Brad texted me an apology." I looked at her over the rim of the mug. "For you or for himself?" "Himself, mostly." A faint, humorless smile touched her mouth and disappeared. "He said he did not realize who you were. That was not the problem." "I know." She looked toward the ring, then away from it. "I told him that." I set the mug down. Outside, the first garbage truck of the morning groaned down the block, brakes squealing softly in the cold. Ordinary sound. Ordinary street. Extraordinary damage sitting at our kitchen island with coffee cooling beside it. Claire folded her hands. "I am not going to ask you to put it back on." The sentence surprised me more than if she had begged. "What are you asking?" "For a chance to become someone who deserves that question later." I studied her face. People can say the right words when they are afraid. Fear is an excellent speechwriter. But there was something different in her voice now. Not performance, not strategy, not the polished rhythm she used when she needed a room to approve her. This sounded unfinished, which made it closer to true. "That will take longer than a bad day at work," I said. "I know. It will take more than being embarrassed." "I know that too." She reached for a folder beside the laptop and slid it toward me. I wrote down what I approved at Northbridge, where I should have pushed back, and where I repeated language because it protected my position. I am sending it to the audit team, not just Human Resources. I opened the folder. Her handwriting filled 3 pages, neat at first, messier toward the end. Dates, meetings, phrases, warnings ignored, names of people who had softened numbers into optimism. It was not a confession designed for sympathy. It was inventory. Good hearts still check the posts, my father used to say. Maybe damaged hearts had to start there too. "This could hurt your career," I said. Claire took a slow breath. "Maybe my career needs to be hurt where it learned to lie." I looked at her then, really looked. Not as the woman from the gala, not as the employee behind a conflict wall, not as the wife who had laughed while strangers measured me incorrectly. Just Claire. Flawed, frightened, proud, and for the first time in a long time, standing closer to the truth than to her image. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Thomas." I answered. "The audit firm is confirmed," he said. "Martin signed the expanded engagement letter this morning. Full access, no carve-outs." "Good. There is more. The board wants a direct meeting with you next week. No intermediaries. They want to discuss governance if the deal proceeds." Claire looked down at her hands, but I knew she could hear every word. "Set it for Tuesday," I said. "And Thomas?" "Yes." "No public statement using my name." "Not yet." "Understood." I ended the call. Claire did not ask whether the investment would go through. That mattered too. A week earlier, it would have been her first question. Maybe the only one. "Are you going to save the company?" she asked finally. I looked out the kitchen window at our backyard, at the bare maple tree and the fence I repaired last spring while Claire took a call from Denver and waved thanks through the glass without stopping her conversation. I am going to let the truth decide what the company is worth, I said. If Northbridge is real underneath the polish, it will survive. If it is not, my money should not be the paint over rotten wood. She nodded. And us. There it was again, smaller than business and harder than finance. I picked up the ring from the table. Claire held very still. I did not put it on. I placed it on the windowsill above the sink, where morning light touched it, but neither of us could pretend it was settled. Same answer, I said. The truth decides what we are worth. Her eyes filled, but she nodded. No argument. No performance. Just the cost of hearing me. That afternoon, Thomas sent me the signed audit confirmation, and Claire sent her full timeline to the review team. By evening, Martin Hale called personally, not to flatter me, not to posture, but to say Northbridge would cooperate and accept whatever came from the findings. His voice sounded 10 years older than it had at the gala. Consequence does that. It strips the music out of men who used to speak in slogans. I stood in the garage while he talked, beside my old Ford, beneath the fluorescent light that flickered when the weather turned cold. On the workbench sat a loose hinge, a box of screws, and the socket wrench my father gave me when I was 19. Simple things. Useful things. The kind of things Claire once loved about me before she mistook them for limits. When the call ended, I stayed there a while, breathing in sawdust, motor oil, and winter air. I was not healed. I was not certain. I was not the triumphant man people imagine when the room finally learns his name. But I was free of one thing. I no longer needed to be misunderstood quietly. Through the kitchen window, I saw Claire standing at the sink, looking at the ring on the sill. She did not touch it. She just stood there with her hands wrapped around a mug, letting the light hit the truth between us. For the first time in years, neither of us looked away.